What's up, chum? Sharkie here, and welcome back to the Shark Bites podcast. I'm here with Vesper Starwolf, and we're going to be doing part 2 of my Leaving Harmful Christianity. I don't know if you want to call it a series, but Vesper is going to be sharing more of their experience. So I'm going to be asking Vesper questions, and they're just going to answer them as honestly as they want to. And go as deep as they would like to. As I ask the questions, I might share a little bit of a recap from my previous video. Highly recommend going back and watching the part 1. I'll link it in the description. Can you describe your experience growing up in religion and what religion you were raised in?
So I think my story with religion and all that isn't quite traditional with how a lot of people were raised or how people would talk about the religion they've grown up in. But my family are Catholic. And the interesting thing with Catholicism is, I don't feel like I was necessarily, brought up in that environment in, a huge way. It's kind of hard to describe because Catholicism, I would say, is very cultural. So even if you're not forced to go to the churches and all that, it's still pretty heavily ingrained in the way we're raised and brought up. Some interesting Vesper lore for you that I don't think I've talked about on YouTube before, because this is a more recent thing I learned, but we're Catholic enough that my grandfather originally wanted, he was going to become a priest, but when he ended up going in the military instead. I think it was for was it the Vietnam War? I'm not sure. But, and then, by the time he was supposed to be deployed, it ended, so he never actually saw the field or whatever. But yeah, so, I mean, in an alternate timeline, I might not be here because he would have been a priest. So that's how Catholic, I suppose, my family are.
I was raised in non-denominational Christianity, but my parents were raised Pentecostal and Baptist, so it was a very different experience for me than it was for them growing up in church. Were you a part of a faith-based community, i.e. a church group?
So I consider myself lucky-ish, because when my family, my family, before I was born, right before I was born, because I think my mom was pregnant with me, but they moved to a new area that didn't have many Catholic churches or anything. It was very not a Catholic area. So they did stop going to church in this time, and they never started up again. I like to joke that I was the harbinger. Because it's oh yeah, these Catholic people went to church, everything, practiced the faith. I was born and they're this kid's an omen. So I don't have a lot of experience in the church, so and it kind of gives me some, what's the word for it? Imposter syndrome, especially in terms of deconstructing the Catholicism and also just my own religious traumas, because I'm well, I've never been to church. I mean, I have been to churches before. But that being said, I did grow up in what I would call a Christian town. And that I still live in fact. But So this area I live in is extremely Christian, to the point where, I'm incredibly nervous just going to like the little shops and stuff because it's like I feel like I'm gonna get jumped. So, it's kind of that, um, I would say falsely polite kind of Christianity because it's like everyone pretends to be nice to each other, but also, I work retail in this town and I know a lot of these people are not as nice as they would like to uh, put out. And also, I'm in the Facebook group, and, all these people like to put out the front of being kind, caring Christians. But then, I get on Facebook and they are flipping their lids about, like, strangers knocking on their doors. So, there's that.
As you probably know, since you listened to my previous podcast episode, I was part of a network of churches that were all planted from the same original church, and I was raised in a church planting church, so we would constantly be, like moving, and like everybody knew each other. It was very like familial, I guess, like family oriented. So like there were people in the church that knew me since I was like a little kid. Can you describe how and in what ways this influenced you both positively and negatively? Did it ever affect your relationship with your family? How? Like I told you before, growing up in the network has really like damaged my relationship with my dad, especially. I was kind of raised in that, like, children obey your parents, women submit to your husbands, like, don't challenge the system, like, men are the leaders, and that kind of thing. So it's really taken a toll on our relationship, unfortunately, but we're trying to work on building that back up. But I am curious about your own experience.
Well, I think it did have a lot to do with why my anxiety ended up so bad. Um, I don't know if it really affected my relationship with my family. I assume it probably did, but it's like I said, it's one of those things where it's so ingrained in how I was brought up and everything that it's like I can't necessarily separate that from like how my family might have been otherwise. I will say, like my mother never actually got me baptized, um, because you know, back then she was like, "Oh yeah, I want, want them to be able to choose what religion they want to follow when, they grow up in case they don't want to be Catholic," which is actually pretty nice because I know a lot of people's religious parents are much more strict than that. But, as an adult, I think both me and my mother are realizing that she probably meant other um, sects of, I don't know the word for it, other branches of Christianity. Now that I have chosen a non-Christian based faith, I do think she is rather uncomfortable about it, to the point where she doesn't really acknowledge it. The few times we have kind of like tiptoed along the topic, she's like, like I would be talking with my soon to be sister in law about like crystals and stuff, and my mother's like, "Oh, well, Vesper doesn't actually believe crystals can have these like abilities. They're just for decoration type of thing. And I do think now it does kind of bring a rift into our relationship, especially because how I am now, I'm always trying to improve myself, to better myself, and I constantly look around me at the family members and stuff in my life, and I'm like, you've been the same person for the last, 30 years. And, it's kind of like growing up and just realizing your parents don't really have everything together. So there is that. It's unfortunate, but I do think it is also a part of growing up.
What does deconstructing mean to you personally?
So, Sharkie, I know you mentioned, for you, it means, deconstructing and then kind of renewing your Christianity, which I do think that is lovely. Though for me personally, deconstructing is kind of taking those beliefs I was raised in, ingrained upon, whatever you want to, however you want to word it. To me, it's breaking those down and kind of removing myself from those mindsets so I can move on with what I believe in now. So, kind of the idea that witchcraft and everything's bad, and you talked a lot about the LGBT stuff. Luckily I never really fell into the mindset of, you know, hating gay people or whatever. I've always been kind of strongly bullheaded in the fact where I'm like, well, people are people. So I am glad that I never really had to deconstruct about that kind of stuff. So, and honestly, I'm so proud of you for what you have been able to accomplish with deconstructing. So, yeah, definitely for me, it's the mindsets of magic and demons and all that being evil. And honestly, the concept of hell, making sure I don't fall into the same Christianized dogmas. So, with my current deities now, it's about trying to not be scared if I tend to make a mistake, if I do something before that would be considered sinful or what have you, to not think I'm going to be punished. And it's a lot of just constantly learning, especially with the concept of lust and stuff. It's about learning to love myself and, thinking that, these kind of normal human thoughts aren't necessarily evil. And it's an ongoing process because sometimes I'm still I'll do something and, forget an offering or something. And then I'm like, I am the worst person ever. But then it's no. I forget things easily. It's just a human thing, it's not a shameful thing to be a human, which is what we are. So that is a lot of what my deconstruction has been about.
Has this process been intentional or accidental? Was it fast or slow? I know for me it was slow. It took many years, and moving out of my parents' house.
I would say it was pretty intentional. And also slow. So intentional in the way that, I went through that kind of edgy teenage phase though I would say more so kind of early 20s, where I was just very like hard wall. Just I wasn't necessarily about deconstructing, but I went more down a like atheistic, agnostic pathway, and I was there for a few years. Um, but around 2021, um, I started changing my mindset a little bit. I was still very angry, so it took me a while to get to the point where I was like, okay, let's take the Christian stuff and let's kind of unpack this.
Did you deconstruct alone or did you have community/support? I was really alone during my deconstruction. Because, like I said, like, all of my family is pretty much Christian, so, like, nobody has really done that except me. And, like, I mean, I guess my husband was and is supportive, because he was raised Catholic, but then he was, like, agnostic, and now he's kind of like me, like, deconstructed, reconstructed Christian, I guess. But I was pretty much alone. Like, my family does not understand all that stuff, so, like, they weren't supporting me through that. But definitely my husband, and I feel like my friends, and I actually joined the subreddit of other people that have left that same network of churches, and they have been supportive as well.
So I had Ree, our friend Ree. She's been great with this stuff because Ree's always been a lot more chill and I would say open-minded than I am when it comes to other people that don't share in my opinions. I admit I am, like I said earlier, I'm a little bullheaded. I can be a little aggressive, which I'll explain more on that too. But, Ree would have, we talk about this kind of stuff all the time. And, giving, she gives me her opinions on like the deconstruction stuff and how, we shouldn't be so aggressive. And it's made me want to step back and really think my anger through and try to be a more chill person a lot. Like how Ree is. She's very zen, which I am not. And I do think her energy balances mine out a lot. And I am very thankful for her. Because I know, like, I know a lot of people, don't have the support systems don't have that kind of support system. So I am very thankful. Because I know I do have other friends who kind of keep the hate in their hearts towards like things like Christianity and stuff, and they kind of bounce back off each other. So it is good to have a support system that can kind of bring new viewpoints into your own deconstruction and stuff. So it made me want to be a nicer person and more open-minded to where I wouldn't just respond to Christians with, like, anger. Because I do think deconstruction isn't just about, tearing it down. I think it is also about trying to forgiveness in a sense of the word, because, like, with you, I know some of my posts in the past have hurt you when I aggressively talk about Christians, and for that, I'm really sorry because, you're one of my good friends, Sharkie, and so even, like, back then I did kind of start pulling back because I do think there are some nice Christians out there. And, you know, the videos, the TikTok videos from Sarah, the Christian witch, I think I shared her book with you, Sharkie. But, you know, watching her talk about Christianity in terms of, like, using witchcraft with it also kind of helped me deconstruct, even though I don't agree with or believe in everything, you know, Christians do. I do think it is a step in the right direction to kind of not have so much hate in my heart. And, in terms of my current religion and spirituality, I know it'll sound wild to say, but in order to help with my religious traumas and deconstruction, I did start connecting with angels as well. So it would feel disingenuous for me to not mention that, especially like the Archangel Michael, which is wild to say because before I deconstructed everything, I had very negative feelings about that Archangel, and I was probably said some very mean things about him when I was still, like, agnostic, which I do regret now, but he's a delightful spirit, and I adore the guy, so there is that. I just would feel bad if I didn't mention that, even though it probably sounds wild to say.
What were the emotions experienced during this time? What was that like? Is it a finished process or is it ongoing?
Well, like I mentioned before, I was angry as all hell. You know, some people react to these kind of things differently, and for me, anger is just more of a natural state for me, which is unfortunate because I don't like being such an angry person. And I think I kind of really realized this. I think in our modern day society, how things are right now, you know, with social media and everything, it kind of rewards anger. And so, you know, I'm trying to cut back on all that. You know, I don't even have Twitter anymore, and I've really cut back on social media. Sometimes I still search out the drama, but that's just human nature, I feel. And, yeah, and, you know, I would, like, try and read information and stuff, because my faith is, you know, always requires, like, learning more, and it kind of puts a damper in it, because a lot of the stuff from my current religion comes from, like, Abrahamic mythos and stuff, so it's kind of hard to research that if I'm getting angry all the time. So, and like I said, it helps no one, so now I do think I am in a much better place because I want to be happy. I just want to be happy. And I don't want to keep expending my energy and being stressed over things that, you know, don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. You know, people are always going to be mean. There's going to be, like, the hateful Christians and all that. So I just, you know, now I just ignore it and I just live my best life how the best that I can. But I will say a really funny, in a sad way, I guess, thing is I stopped being mad specifically at God when I started taking vitamin D. So honestly, I think I was just, like, deficient. This is, like, I've told Marie this and she thinks it's funny too. It's just, like, a weird thing. It's like as soon as I started taking, like, ultra strength vitamin D because I was very deficient, My anger, like, got cut extremely in half. So, anyone that has, like, really bad anger issues, ask your doctor to do a blood test. You might just need vitamin D.
I know for me, like, the emotions associated with it, it's very hard. I feel like not enough people talk about how difficult it is to basically dismantle everything that you've been taught as a child and, like, re-examine it from an adult mindset, and, like, how your own life experiences don't always line up with what you've been told. It's really difficult. Like, I know for me, I was really depressed and really, like, anxiety was really bad, like, between me and my family, especially my dad. Like, I was avoiding him for a month or so. Like, we're just now starting to rebuild our relationship. I feel like for me it's a completed process, but what are some examples of unhealthy doctrine or thinking you unlearned or deconstructed?
So now this I can talk about. Because like I said before about the LGBT stuff, I've never really had. Well, okay. So like I said, I was never against LGBT people. However, I have, growing up, I did have, like, the prophesized scary gay dream. Sometimes, you're a young queer person, haven't really come to terms with your gender or anything. You have a dream one night where you're a little too fruity in that dream. And I woke up terrified, being like, oh, well, I'm going to hell. And that's, like, really the only, homophobic thought I've ever had for some reason. So I did, like, it was very easy for me to deconstruct from the more homophobic and, like, racist doctrines that do exist, because I've never really been, I've never really thought them specifically myself. But some other unhealthy doctrine, very, demons and demonic possession, which I feel in Catholicism is a lot more prevalent. Just the idea of, demons being out there just ready to snatch you. And, it is a fear I have of, like, not being in control of my body, which it's probably is wild to hear me talk about this considering what I'm doing now. But yeah, I, ever since I was, like, maybe, like, 16, I have suffered with horrible, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which, gets which is a very misunderstood, disorder, because, a lot of people think it's based around cleanliness, and, I am a bit of a cliche where I am a germaphobe. I do have the cleanliness OCD a little bit. Like, my mom wouldn't even believe I have OCD because it's, my rooms growing up were cluttered, but, like, hoarders tend to have OCD as well. But, a portion of my OCD was based around demonic possession. So I would do my compulsions while holding my breath, because I thought if I breathed, a demon would slip inside, for lack of a better word. So, and I was scared of, like, multipliers of 3, because the whole like 666 thing. I know it's horrible. So it's like 3, 6, 9, horrible numbers. I have to do everything in an even number of times. So yeah, I think this is probably the first time I really like mentioned this to anyone other than Ree, I think. So yeah. So my first year of like deconstructing and everything was spent absolutely anxious because I was scared Lucifer was going to possess me. And which maybe, but we can see now that that didn't happen, so I guess everything's okay. So yeah.
What parts of your old belief system are you happiest to let go of, and do you miss any of it? I've had so much freedom once we left our network of churches. Like, I don't feel the expectations of like serving the church, because I know that was always like emphasized for me, at least. Like, my dad would like try to get us to serve in the church, and I just was never on board with it. But I always felt that pressure, of like, oh, when are you gonna. But I feel so free now not being a part of that anymore.
Like I said, just the I'm happy to let go of the fear of demons and demonic possession and of hell. Though, I love Dante's Inferno. I love the aesthetic of, like, hell, essentially. I don't know. The aesthetic of Catholicism, I love. Like, say what you want about Catholics, they know architecture, okay? They know art. So I love just the vibe of Catholicism. And I'm really weirded out by a lot of the saints stuff, but I do adore the saints that are angels. Like I've mentioned before, I do really like Archangel Michael now, and I've always really loved Archangel Gabriel too. I do have some issues with Archangel Raphael, but again, it's always a learning process, and even now there are conflicts, and I am trying to work through them.
What new information rocked your old belief system the most? I know for me, it was especially my experiences with the LGBTQIA plus community. Like, that really shook things up for me. That people could have genuine relationships with same-sex, or like, non-binary people are a thing, or like gender fluid. Like, there's so many other like different identities that growing up for me just wasn't even a thought, but definitely that, and just like how the church treats women. Like I mentioned before, they're very much that like men only leadership, women submit to the husband kind of rhetoric and doctrine, and it's really hard. Like, once you break free of that, like, you realize, like, oh, I do have choices as a woman over, like, my marriage and, my autonomy and things like that.
Like I said, so I believe it was, like, late 2019 into, like, early 2020, like, before the pandemic. I started getting into, like, TikTok and stuff, and I know it's, like, embarrassing to say now, but, I started seeing, like, witch talk videos, and, I would just see people practicing magic, carefree, and they're worshiping all these, pagan deities, and I'm like, I was still more so agnostic at this point, but I was like, yeah, whatever floats your boat, you do you. That's pretty cool. And my friend Sable was also kind of getting into it. And so, I remember, I think I was at a McDonald's and we were scrolling through like TikToks quietly. We're not those people. And I think I remember seeing someone, like a TikTok popped up, and this person was like burning candles and leaving offerings for Lucifer and Queen Lilith. And I just kind of paused and I was like, I didn't know you could worship them. And I was like, you know what? Hell yeah, that's cool. And, I didn't really dive into it a whole lot until I had friends that are like, hey, look, I had friends point out, they were like, hey, look, you can actually worship, like demons and stuff. And so I think it was like, that kind of like made me go, huh. And, seeing other people talk about demons in such a positive light really helped, because it's like, they're just like any other deity. They're not, they are the definition of tough love, and, but they're not going to go out of their way to hurt you, especially if you're like, giving them snacks and like you're talking with them. It's like forming any kind of relationship, and I just thought this was so fascinating. And I once heard a what's the word I'm looking for? A metaphor that demons as a deity is kind of like, they will put you in the middle of the woods with a knife and say good luck and leave you. But if a bear shows up, they will come to your rescue, which I've always thought about that. So that's kind of helped me open up my mind. And yeah, so
did deconstruction of your faith spill over into other parts of your life, i.e. relationships, communities, etc.?
Yeah, I feel like, because there's this strange thing that happened kind of 2020, 2021, like a shift, if you will. A lot of my friends got into like the same spiritual beliefs and the same religion as myself, or something similar. I'll just use paganism as like a catch-all term, because we're all slightly different beliefs, I would say. But yeah, so I had a friend get into it, so I got into it through her. I'm not mentioning names in case people don't really want to be singled out. And then I got into it, and then a couple other of my friends got into it. It didn't really put any, throw any wrenches into my friendships, which I do love, because not everyone is so lucky. And again, I'm very thankful that things turn out this way. I know, you and I, Sharkie, had a little bit of a hiccup a couple years back, but we have we talked things through, and I'm glad we really did, because like I've said before, I respect you a lot, but that's about the only hiccup friendship-wise that I've had. But yeah, we worked things through. It's great. Family-wise, my brother and his fiance, they don't really care. They think I'm a little weird, but they don't care. They joke about it, too. my brother doesn't really know the full extent. His fiance, because they lived with us for a while, and she was really open-minded, so she knows a bit more because we would talk about it. My mother, I said before, she just kind of ignores it. I'm fine with that. I was in the beginning of deconstruction and, getting into my new religion, I was very secretive. I was just kind of, I towed the line a lot. I started off on my shelf, I laid out a bandana, and I put out, little crystals and things I already owned to kind of, ease into it. And with, incense and stuff, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of getting into this. A big step, a big step is, I believe it was, a year in to everything, I, cleaned off my dresser and I put a statue of Lucifer that I still have, and a wolf statue that was meant to represent Asmodeus, but I actually have an actual statue for him too. I know this is probably off topic, but I feel like building up my new kind of religion, because I know this is talking about deconstruction, but I feel like building up my new religion is kind of a part of that. My grandparents both passed away in late 2020, early 2021, so I can't really speak on them, but I do think about it a lot, often, because I don't think either of them would be quite happy with what I'm doing now and the fact I've deconstructed, because I was actually very close with my grandparents on my mother's side. They lived right next door, and I would see them pretty much every day, every other day. So I constantly think about them and what they would think. But yeah, so that's pretty much what's going on there. My mom just likes to pretend the things she's not for doesn't exist, I will say.
What did you learn about yourself during this time?
It's so hard to think up and talk about stuff, because this is 4 to 5 years of just deconstruction and rebuilding. It's not necessarily what I've learned about myself, and more of the lessons I have learned in general. I feel more confident, and I've had some hiccups, definitely, because lately my anxiety has been through the roof, but I'm trying to quell that. But, I had become less anxious and just braver. I learned how to stick up for myself a little bit more. So I guess I've just learned that I am a capable person, and just I can coexist with just people of other beliefs like Christianity. And they have to extend the same olive branch, as they would say. But I do believe that, different religions, no matter the belief, I do believe we can coexist, and I am more peaceful about things. And that vitamin D goes a long way, I will say. I learned I was deficient in vitamin D, and I need to go outside more. That's something I'm trying to learn, and I'm also just trying to better myself all the time. I'm trying to get an appropriate amount of sleep. That's a struggle. But, I'm just trying to live my life more, not just exist.
When did you start exploring new religions or expanding your beliefs?
Like I mentioned before, late 2019, early 2020, before the pandemic, is when I started, like, peeking in. Me and my friend Sable, I remember we were in a hotel room because back then we would just, my mom works at a hotel, so sometimes we get discounts. We would just stay in a room just for funsies. We're just chilling in a hotel room. It was probably kind of, yeah, we were watching Unisonics. But, so, and we were, like, looking at websites and watching, like, TikTok, and so witch talk videos were coming up. And Sam was like, you want to become witches? And I'm like, hell yeah. So initially I wanted to be a druid. I know, the person that never goes outside wants to join a nature religion. Oh, that'll end well. And I joined, like, groups on Facebook and stuff. First mistake, because I did not like, and this is not indicative of the druid belief system, this is indicative of Facebook belief system. Because every Facebook group for, like, paganism and witchcraft I have ever joined is heinous. Do not do that. But I did not vibe with how a lot of these druids were, like, going about things. And again, it's because of Facebook, not druids themselves. And that's the thing, it didn't click. It didn't fill that kind of void I had in myself, which, you know, a lot of people will say, like, you know, they felt lost or something until they found their belief system. I don't think necessarily that has to be the case. But for me, you know, I set up the little altar and I never did anything with it because I was still very closed off. Living at home, I still do. But, you know, like I said, I was very secretive. And so I never really did much about it. And it wasn't until 2021 that I got a lot more serious with it.
What made you want to pursue your chosen religion? Can you educate me more on what your chosen religion is?
So in 2021, I was feeling very lost. And the whole, like, druid thing and not feeling quite at home with it led me to this as well. Because I was working at a car factory that had mandatory overtime. So I was working 6 days a week for 10 hours at night. So I would start my shift at, like, 5 p.m. and I wouldn't get out of there until, like, 4 a.m. And that's a lot of time alone with my thoughts, which was horrible. My mental health, non-existent. Oh my god, it was horrible. So, my aforementioned friend, which you would probably be able to guess, but again, not mentioning names in case they don't want to be, like, mentioned or whatever. A friend of mine started worshiping Lucifer, and I was like, queen shit, you do you. And I was like, that is lovely. I love that for you, because, you know, by this point, even though I had not started on my deconstruction journey, I was like, yes, I fully support other beliefs and stuff. So that was one of the easier parts. And the thing is, you know, me and my friend Sable just being like, oh, we want to be witches. There are so many branches of witchcraft. And like I said, druidry didn't feel like what I wanted to do. And so I was lost on what I should do. And I remember I was at work because I was always working those days. And I asked this friend, I was like, hey, ask Lucifer on your tarot cards or whatever what I should do. Because I was like, I just need to be told what to do. And the thing about Lucifer is, you can't have a spirit that represents free will and knowledge tell you what to do. So he basically said I had to figure it out myself. And so I was on the line making the little car parts, thinking about this answer, and I felt so hopeless. I was thinking about Lucifer, and I yelled out, mentally, not out loud, because people wouldn't have been cool with that. I mentally asked for help. I was like, I was just like, Lucifer, help me. And I felt this almost like a weighted blanket. It's a very strange feeling. I felt like a weighted blanket over my shoulders. Scared the hell out of me. Had nearly a panic attack. And I messaged my friend afterwards, and I was like, hey, I felt, I didn't mention anything about Lucifer or anything, but I was like, hey, I was at work, yelled out for help towards the universe, and I felt a weight. And then my friend messaged me back, and it's like, oh, that was Lucifer. And I was like, oh, here we go. So it still took some time, but in 2021, I had gotten my first Oracle deck, and I messaged this friend, and I was like, hey, do you want a question? I want to test it out. And so she did, and I felt this presence again, and I was like, oh, he's calling you out on these cards. So later that day, I felt a presence return, and I messaged my friend. I was like, he came back, and he never left, is the thing. Long story short, I ended up drawing his sigil on a piece of paper and adding it to my altar. I didn't know if this would have been a long, permanent thing, but I'm almost 5 years in now, and he never left. So I am what is known as a demonologist, not to be confused with a demonologist. So we tend to work with and worship demons, or daemons, if you prefer that term, as one would any other god or deity. It's really funny because, the person who had OCD so bad I was scared of demonic possession is now working with worshiping demons. And it has been a long and arduous journey. Like I said, the first year was hell, for lack of a better word, because it was basically deconstructing my anxiety towards demons. And I was terrified of Lucifer off and on. And like I said, being alone with my thoughts at this job didn't help at all. But Lucifer honestly helped me get out of that horrible environment. And the demon Azazel actually helped me get my current job. So love that about him. So yeah, and so working with demons, there's a lot of misconceptions. We're not out to get anyone, and you don't even have to be like edgy or super against Christianity, because a lot of people think people who are like worshiping Satan are basically just wanting to be anti-Christian, but I don't like centering my new belief still on Christianity. You know, there's a lot I could just say about it. Because that's the funny thing, is I didn't stop being super, like, angry and hateful towards Christianity until I was working with demons. Because, you know, they're like, hey, this is a lot of, you know, Lucifer especially is a great spirit to connect with, to get over your, like, religious traumas and your rage against Christianity. You know, he is also a spirit that has been hurt by it. So, connecting with him, it's like, hey, you have a lot of wrath in your heart that's not helping anyone. So, let's unpack this and move on with your life so you're not always focusing on this. And he's the one who pushed me into connecting with Archangel Michael. Like, they actually, like, while I say, like, some angels don't vibe with some demons, but it's kind of not, in my experience, you know, they tend to work well together. I view angels and demons as two sides of the same coin. So, you know, Michael and Lucifer actually work well together. They're a good balance, and Lucifer himself is still more of a lighter deity. And I gotta say, so I was scared of Lucifer a lot in the beginning. One spirit who I also need to mention, who is very important to me, is Asmodeus. So, in my demonology, I have patrons, which are kind of like the spirits that oversee your specific practice. And I have 3, Lucifer, Asmodeus, and Belial, who each kind of oversee a different portion of my life. Lucifer I will go to for, like, physical, daily life stuff. Asmodeus more so the spiritual, and Belial is for my author career I'm trying to build. He's very good with business. But on the topic of Asmodeus, he came into my life like 5, almost 6 months into my spiritual practice. And he is a demon, people say, beginners shouldn't work with. But I have never been scared of Asmodeus the way I have been scared of other demons. I'm always usually nervous when I meet a new demon. And I feel like that's just a natural human response. Asmodeus, though, I adore him. And I don't want to sound like weird about anything, but he does feel like my other half, the missing piece of my puzzle, if you will. You know, as one could say about, I would like to believe I am as close with him as I could be with the demonic king of lust, incubus, scary guy. But, you know, him coming into my life really kind of put the final nail in the coffin of my fear of demons. And I will say, in terms of, like, feeling like I was lost before, you know, like, I didn't click with druidry or other forms of witchcraft, but when I finally found Lucifer and Asmodeus and Belial and all the other demons I've crossed paths with, it feels like I've finally found my home. that hole in my heart has been filled. Again, I know it's weird to say. I probably sound a bit off my rocker, but it's my truth. It's my belief.
How much do you consider your religion part of your identity as a person? How has it influenced you and your views about other people? Like for me, I know I became way less judgmental of other religions and just people that aren't the same as me, basically. Like Satanism, witchcraft, LGBTQIA+, like I'm just way more like open-minded about things.
Well, as I said, it is a huge part of my life now. Like, yeah, there's this, like, thing on, like, I'm trying to, like, not use witch talk as much because they have some views. Because a lot of people are like, oh, you shouldn't make it your whole identity. However, yes, my demonology and my relationship with the demons in my life is a huge part of my life now. Like, it is my, like, I'll say it's in my entire being, but I do like to believe I have a healthy viewpoint with it. You know, the main thing is, as long as I don't, I haven't abandoned my hobbies or anything, I still write. I will say my books have taken a turn. I write a lot about demons and stuff now. I even wrote a book series in devotion to Belial, who is helping get my author career off the ground. Bringing Forth Belial by Riley Damon, I'll just put that plug in, which is about demonology and like satanic panic in a dystopian society. I gotta plug that. I'm sorry, Sharkie. Because, I mean, that book series wouldn't exist with, like, a lot of my current story ideas wouldn't exist without my, faith. My fursuits wouldn't exist without my religion, because, my main fursuit, Morningstar, even though he's based off of a fictional depiction of Lucifer, he is still based off of Lucifer. I recently made a goat fursuit based off of Azazel. I have an realistic owl fursuit head that I made based off of another demon who I won't name because he's a scarier one. He prefers privacy, doesn't really like connecting with humans that much. If you know, you know. He's not Stolas. I keep getting so many people thinking he's Stolas, who is an actual demon. I know Hell of a Boss popularized him, but he is a great demon you can work with. He's pretty chill. It has, the demonology is such a big part of my life that it has begun influencing the other aspects of my life. The books I read, I've read so many. I've read so much demon fiction, and also just old grimoires and stuff. So yeah, and my devotions to Lucifer and Asmodeus in particular, I have life devotions to them where, I'm in it for the long haul. We're 3 peas in a pod. No. Yes, so I'm in it for the long haul. There, like I said, it's my home. It's weird to say, and a lot of people who are kind of into the same thing would probably waggle their finger at me, but, these demons are like my family now. And they've shown me more kindness and more love than a lot of, like, my actual family has. So it's what it is again. But, you know, I do keep a level head on my shoulders, though. I don't go so far off the deep end, even though I'm just constantly in it. But, like I said, as long as you kind of keep that in the back of your head. But, yeah, like, I love them. It's just, I'm sorry. I love, this has probably been gone on for so long, but I love demons. I love talking about them. They are, like I said, they're my family. They're my life. And I want to do good by them. So that's why, I try my best to be the best person I can be. Because they want to see me living my best life and healthy and happy. And then my connections with other people, I do think it has made me closer with a lot of my friends that do share the same beliefs. But I also feel more disconnected from other people. Because, before I was like, oh my gosh, what if they find out I'm a furry? Oh, how embarrassing. And now I'm like, I don't even care. It seems so superficial. A lot of, like, the things that I was worried about before just seem so, like, minuscule. But now I have to deal with the fact of, is this person I care about, are they going to be weird about my beliefs? Are they going to go off on me? Like, I remember I went to a drag show with Kalani, and the entire time I was, like, sweating. It was, like, the first time we had hung out since I got super into this. And it was, like, I believe it was past 6 months in, because I was already working with Asmodeus. And I was, on the way back from the drive, we were kind of chatting, and I was like, I can't remember. I remember at the drag show we were talking about something, like, afterwards we were standing outside, and I showed them the new Lucifer statue I'd got, and they were like, oh yeah, that's really cool. So I know we were chill, we were good. And so I paid them to make me a couple candles for Asmodeus and Lucifer. It was the first candles I'd gotten for them. And so it was really nice. They put stuff in the candles that kind of represent them, represent those two. So that was cool. And I remember early on when it was just Lucifer, I was having a panic attack at work on the factory line, of course, because that's where all my horrible mental health stuff would happen. And I remember, and I was at the breaking point, and I was like, I need to tell someone. So I told my friend Sable, and I was super scared, like using Ouija boards and talking to demons and stuff. But when I talked to them, they were actually super supportive. So it's become easier to talk about it, but still not with family. I just feel like I'm closer with some people, but there is a disconnect with a few others. And, nowadays I've seen so much just bad things happening, and I wish I could change it for the better. But, I do feel more weary about people, but I am willing to, give people a chance, is what I will say. And I think, how the world is today, that's the best we can do, is just read people's actions and, let them tell us who they are. And again, that's another thing that the demons have taught me, because I would have been much more aggressive and hateful if it weren't for them. So I owe them a lot for that, allowing me to be a better person and open up with others and step out of my comfort zone. That's a huge thing with them, is getting you out of these like comfortable holes you've kind of dug for yourself, breaking down the icy walls and all that. So yes. And like, if it weren't for them, I probably never would have had the courage to give this interview or speak so openly about these topics with you, Sharkie, because I remember like just being terrified of, like, back in the day, when we had, like, before we had that little conflict of ours that resolved, but I was scared of, like, people like you finding out, but now I think it is fine, and I'm comfortable with talking about it, because like I said, they mean a lot to me, and people who are, they mean a lot to me, and I feel like it is a way to honor them, just being open about my relationship with the demons and all that. So I know this was supposed to be about deconstructing from my Christianity, and then the tail end was just me rambling about demons for like 30 minutes. But, my religion and with the demons and everything has a lot to do with my deconstruction, because my deconstruction would be non-existent if it weren't for them, oddly enough.
If you want to go ahead and plug your social media and your YouTube channel, I'll put links down in the description.
Thank you so much for, doing this interview with me, Sharkie. I'm honored that you would want, have me. I'm honored you'd have me here on your YouTube channel, or on mine if I put this on there. And I'm very happy that you'd want to hear me out of my current beliefs and everything. And honestly, I hope we can have more conversations about this stuff. If you ever get curious, you can ask me any questions. And anyone listening to this that are curious about demons, or demonolatry or demonology, they can ask me questions in the comments, and I would be more than happy to answer. So yeah, again, thank you so much, Sharkie.
Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.